The frozen world had no name that Evan Hale liked to use. On the maps, it was marked with numbers and symbols, cold and sharp like the planet itself. To Evan it was just a place of white ground, dark sky, and endless wind. He had been sent to study it, to gather samples and weather data, and then leave. It was not meant to be a long stay. Things had not gone as planned. Evan was alone. His team had been forced to leave early when their main ship took damage in orbit. Evan had stayed behind in a small research tent, confident he could survive until rescue returned. He had trained for this. He had practiced survival in cold places on Earth. But this planet was colder than any place he had ever known. The storm had started as a light wind. At first, Evan had thought nothing of it. He had checked the tent seals, reinforced the support lines, and gone back to his work. Then the wind grew stronger. Snow turned into sharp ice dust that cut at the fabric of the tent. The sky darkened even though it was supposed to be daytime. Now the storm howled like a living thing. Evan sat inside the tent, wrapped in layers of thermal clothing. His breath fogged the air. The heater hummed, but the sound was weak. The temperature display blinked in dull red numbers. It was dropping, slow but steady. He checked the power cell again. Still enough to last the night, maybe longer if the storm eased. He told himself not to worry. Worry wasted heat. Worry wasted time. Still, he felt the cold creeping closer, like fingers pressing through the walls. The tent shook as a strong gust hit it. Evan grabbed a support pole to steady himself. Snow slid down the sides in heavy waves. He waited, counting his breaths, until the shaking stopped. He forced himself to stand and move. Staying still was dangerous. He checked the seals again, pressing his gloved hands along the edges. A small crack near the lower flap let in a thin stream of icy air. He patched it with repair tape, his fingers stiff and slow. That was when he saw movement outside. At first, Evan thought it was a trick of the storm. The wind made shadows dance across the ice. But then he saw it again. Something dark against the white ground, shifting slightly before falling still. Evan frowned. No large life forms were supposed to be active during storms like this. The scans had shown little movement in extreme cold. His training told him to stay inside. His orders told him not to risk exposure. He moved closer to the tent opening anyway. Pulling back the outer flap just a little, Evan peered into the storm. Snow blasted his face, sharp and stinging. He squinted, adjusting his visor. The dark shape was still there, half buried, unmoving. His heart began to beat faster. Against all sense, Evan grabbed his thermal rope and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a wall. Even through his suit, it stole his breath. The wind pushed against him, trying to knock him down. He leaned forward and took slow steps, planting his boots carefully. As he got closer, the shape became clearer. It was a body. Small. Too small to be one of his team. The shape was wrong for any animal he knew from the scans. Long limbs, thin frame, skin a pale blue-gray color. The being lay curled on its side, snow gathering on its back. Evan knelt beside her. She was young. Not a child, but not fully grown either. Her face was smooth, her features soft. Frost clung to her hair, which lay flat against her head in fine strands. Her chest moved, barely, in shallow breaths. She was alive. Evan's mind raced. Alien contact. First contact. Alone. No support. No backup. And she was freezing to death. Protocol screamed at him to retreat, to report, to wait. But another thought pushed through louder than all the rules. If he waited, she would die. Evan reached out with a shaking hand and touched her arm. Her skin was icy, dangerously cold. She did not react. Her eyes stayed closed. "I'm sorry," he muttered, unsure who he was speaking to. "I can't leave you." He worked fast, looping the thermal rope around her and securing it to his belt. Lifting her was harder than he expected. She was light but awkward, and the wind fought him every step. He stumbled once, catching himself before they both fell. Step by step, Evan dragged her back toward the tent. The storm seemed angry now, as if it did not like him taking its prize. The wind screamed louder. Ice stung his face. His arms burned with effort. He focused only on the tent, on the dark shape growing closer. At last he reached it. Evan pulled the flap open and dragged the alien girl inside. The moment the tent sealed shut, the noise dropped to a dull roar. The heater struggled but kept running. Evan collapsed to his knees, gasping. For a moment he just stayed there, breathing hard, feeling the warmth slowly return to his fingers. Then he remembered why he had come back. He turned to the alien girl. Up close, she looked even more fragile. Her lips were tinted darker than her skin, almost purple from the cold. Her breathing was uneven. Evan quickly removed his outer gloves and scanned her with his medical tool. The readings were rough guesses, but enough to tell him she was in danger. Her body temperature was far too low. Evan stripped off one of his thermal layers and carefully wrapped it around her. He adjusted the heater, redirecting more warmth to her side of the tent. He placed heat packs along her arms and legs, careful not to shock her system. "Come on," he whispered, though he did not know if she could hear. "Stay with me." Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Evan watched her chest rise and fall. Each breath felt like a small victory. His own fear sat heavy in his stomach. He had crossed a line. There would be questions. There would be consequences. But as he looked at her, shivering and helpless, none of that mattered. She stirred slightly. A small sound escaped her throat, soft and weak. Her fingers twitched. Evan leaned closer. "Easy," he said gently. "You're safe. I've got you." Her eyes opened just a little. They were a deep silver color, clouded with pain and confusion. They focused on him for half a second, then widened in fear. She tried to pull away, but she was too weak. Evan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said again, keeping his voice calm. "You were freezing. I brought you inside." She stared at him, breathing fast, her body tense. He could see the fear in her eyes. Fear he understood all too well. The storm raged outside, pounding the tent walls. Inside, two strangers from different worlds shared the same fragile warmth. Neither of them knew what would follow. But in that moment, only one thing mattered. They were alive. Mira woke slowly, as if rising through deep water. The first thing she felt was warmth, strange and uneven, pressing against her skin. It confused her. Cold was all she remembered. Endless cold, biting and sharp, pulling her strength away. She tried to move and found that her body did not answer the way it should. Panic rushed through her, fast and bright. Her eyes opened. Light filled her vision, soft and yellow, nothing like the pale glow of the frozen sky. Shapes surrounded her, strange and unfamiliar. Walls curved close around her. The air was warm, thick with a scent she did not know. She sucked in a breath and coughed weakly. Fear took hold. Mira tried to sit up, but her limbs felt heavy, slow, as if they belonged to someone else. A sound escaped her mouth, sharp and broken. She pulled back, pressing herself against the ground, eyes wide. Evan heard the sound and turned at once. He had been sitting near the heater, watching the temperature numbers with careful focus. When he saw her awake, his heart jumped. "Hey," he said softly, raising his hands. "Easy. You're okay." The sounds he made meant nothing to her. His voice was low and steady, but the words were strange. Myra's eyes locked onto him. He was tall, wrapped in layers of fabric, his face uncovered. His skin was a warm shade, his eyes dark and alert. Not one of her kind. She tried to crawl away. Her arms slipped. Weakness flooded her again, and she cried out as pain flared through her muscles. Evan moved without thinking, then stopped himself halfway, remembering how afraid she looked. "It's all right," he said, slow and careful. "I won't touch you." He stayed where he was, kneeling, keeping distance. He let her see his empty hands. Myra's breathing came fast and shallow. Her chest hurt. Her head spun. The warmth that had first comforted her now felt overwhelming, like fire under her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. Evan glanced at the medical scanner resting beside him. Her readings were still unstable. Waking too fast was not good. He needed to help her calm down. He reached slowly for a small pack near his side and pulled out a food bar. He unwrapped it and broke off a small piece. Holding it out, he placed it on the ground between them. "Food," he said, pointing to it, then to his mouth. He mimed chewing. Mira stared at the object. It smelled faintly sweet, not unpleasant. Hunger stirred inside her, sharp and sudden. She had not eaten since before the storm. But fear held her still. Evan waited. He broke off another piece and ate it himself, slow and clear, then nodded toward the rest. He smiled, a small, tired smile that showed no teeth. After a long moment, Mira reached out with shaking fingers and took the food. She sniffed it, then took a careful bite. The taste surprised her. It was dense and warm, spreading energy through her body. She ate the rest quickly, then froze, embarrassed by her hunger. Evan only nodded. "Good," he said. He passed her a small container of water and showed her how to drink. She followed his movements, copying him. The water soothed her dry throat. The storm howled outside, loud even through the tent walls. The sound made Mira flinch. Her body tensed, memories of ice and wind crashing back into her mind. Evan noticed. He shifted closer to the heater and adjusted the setting, letting more warmth flow toward her side. He wrapped another thermal layer around her shoulders, moving slow enough that she could see every step. She did not pull away this time. They sat in silence as the hours passed. The heater hummed. The storm beat against the tent like an angry animal. The light dimmed as power was conserved. Myra's strength returned in small pieces. She tested her fingers, then her legs. Pain lingered, deep and dull, but she could move. She studied Evan when she thought he was not looking. He looked tired. His hands were rough, marked with small cuts. His eyes kept flicking to the tent walls, to the power display, to her. She realized something then. He was afraid too. The thought softened her fear. She touched her chest and spoke her name. Mira. Evan blinked. Mira, he repeated, pointing to her. She nodded. He pointed to himself. Evan. She tried the sound. Evan. He smiled wider this time. They shared no common words, but they shared the long night. They shared the cold pressing outside, the thin safety of fabric and heat between life and death. They shared pain and hunger and the slow return of hope. As the storm raged on, trapping them together, neither knew what the morning would bring. But for now they were not alone. And that was enough. The storm did not end when the night passed. It only changed its rhythm. The wind outside rose and fell like a restless ocean, crashing against the tent walls again and again. Snow packed itself tighter around the base, sealing the shelter in white. The cold never left. It waited, pressing from every side, patient and cruel. Inside the tent, Evan and Mira sat facing each other, wrapped in layers and quiet thought. Trust did not arrive suddenly. It came in small pieces. At first, Mira watched Evan's every movement. When he stood, her muscles tensed. When he reached for tools, her eyes followed his hands. Fear still lived in her, sharp and alert. Evan understood. He moved slowly, never rushing, never blocking her view. Evan noticed changes too. Mira no longer curled into herself at every loud sound. She sat more upright now. Her eyes were clearer. She studied the tent with interest, not panic. When the heater made a strange clicking sound, she tilted her head, listening. That was when she pointed. Evan followed her gesture to the heater unit. A warning light flickered faintly. He frowned. He had seen that light before, during training, but never for long. It usually meant uneven heat flow. He knelt beside the unit and opened the panel. Warm air rushed out, mixed with cold leaks. He adjusted a valve, but the light remained. Mira watched closely. She crawled closer, slow and careful, then pointed again, this time to a small vent near the base of the tent wall. She made a twisting motion with her hand, then spread her fingers wide. Evan stared, then looked at the vent. Snow had piled high outside, blocking it almost completely. Airflow was wrong. Pressure was building inside the system. You're right, he muttered, though she could not understand. He grabbed a tool and carefully cleared part of the vent from the inside, then adjusted the heater again. The light flickered once, then went dark. The warmth evened out. Evan looked at Mira, surprised. You know heat systems, he said softly. Mira did not know the words, but she understood the look. She touched her chest and made a soft sound, then pointed to the heater and made a slow wave motion. Her people used different systems, but the idea was the same. Heat moved. Pressure mattered. Balance kept things alive. Something shifted between them. The storm struck harder that cycle. The tent poles groaned. One of the outer lines snapped with a sharp crack. The fabric pulled tight, stretching dangerously. Evan swore under his breath and grabbed his repair kit. Stay here, he said, pointing to the ground, then to her. Mira shook her head. She crawled toward the entrance and pointed at the wall seam, then at Evan, then made a pulling motion. Evan hesitated. It's dangerous, he said automatically, then sighed. He realized how useless the words were. He nodded instead. They worked together. Evan braced the tent pole while Mira held the inner fabric steady. She was still weak, but determination gave her strength. Her hands shook, but she did not let go. Evan moved fast, tying a new line, reinforcing the seam with extra patches. The wind screamed inches away from them. Snow pushed in through tiny gaps, melting slightly in the warmth before freezing again. Evan's fingers burned with cold. Myra's breath came fast, fogging the air. When it was done, they collapsed back inside, breathing hard. The tent held. Evan laughed quietly, more from relief than joy. Mira made a strange clicking sound that might have been laughter too. From that moment, survival became shared. They divided tasks without words. Evan handled tools, structure, power checks. Mira watched the heat, airflow, and pressure. When something felt wrong to her, she pointed. When Evan noticed damage, he showed her. They learned each other's signs. If Evan tapped twice on a surface, it meant danger. If Mira tilted her head and flattened her hand, it meant stop. Slowly, a simple language formed, built from need and trust. Food was scarce. Evan measured each portion carefully. Mira noticed and began eating less, pushing pieces back toward him. Evan shook his head firmly and split everything evenly. They drank water in small sips, timing it with rest periods to keep body heat stable. When exhaustion hit, they slept in turns. Evan slept lightly, waking at every sound. When it was Myra's turn to rest, he stayed alert, watching the displays. When Evan rested, Mira sat near the heater, eyes open, listening to the tent, ready to warn him. Fear still came at times. Once, a deep cracking sound echoed through the ice beneath them. Mira froze, eyes wide, breath caught. Evan reached out without thinking and touched her arm, grounding her. She flinched, then relaxed when she realized it was him. She did not pull away. Later, when Evan's hands began to shake from cold and hunger, Mira noticed. She placed her hand over his, light and careful, and looked at him steadily. The gesture said enough. The storm dragged on through what felt like endless hours. They spoke little but learned much. Evan learned that Mira was sharp, observant, and brave in quiet ways. She did not rush into danger, but she did not flee either. When something needed to be done, she did it even if her hands trembled. Mira learned that Evan was stubborn and kind. He put himself between danger and others without thinking. He did not complain about pain or fear. When something broke, he fixed it. When something lived, he protected it. At one point, the power dropped suddenly. The heater flickered. Cold rushed in. Evan swore and moved fast, opening panels, checking connections. Mira pointed to a cable, its outer layer stiff and cracked from cold. She made a snapping motion. Evan nodded. Got it? He replaced the cable, rerouted power, and sealed the panel. The heater roared back to life. They sat together afterward, breathing out relief. The storm outside finally began to weaken. The wind dropped from a scream to a howl, then to a steady rush. Snow still fell, but lighter now. Inside the tent, warmth held. Two beings from different worlds sat side by side, wrapped in shared effort. They had started as strangers, bound by cold and fear. Now they were partners in survival. And in that frozen place, trust had become their strongest shelter. The storm finally began to break. The wind softened from a violent scream to a long, tired sigh. Snow still fell, but it drifted instead of cutting. Inside the tent, Evan and Mira felt the change before they saw it. The walls stopped shaking. The heater no longer fought so hard to hold the warmth. Evan checked the sensors one more time. Storm's easing, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Mira watched his face, then looked toward the tent wall. She could feel it too. The cold outside was still deadly, but it was no longer angry. It was waiting. That was when the signal spike appeared. A sharp tone cut through the quiet, high and sudden. Evan stiffened and moved to his console. The scanner showed several fast-moving shapes approaching across the ice. They were not human. Their movement pattern was wrong. Too smooth. Too organized. Mira saw the change in his posture and felt fear bloom again. She followed his gaze to the display. Even without understanding the symbols, she knew what it meant. Her people. She stood quickly, ignoring the ache in her legs. Her breath caught in her throat. Fear, hope, and dread tangled together inside her chest. Evan looked at her. Mira? He pointed at the screen, then gently at her. Them? She nodded once. The sound of movement outside grew louder. Soft crunching steps. Low vibrations through the ice. Shadows passed across the tent walls, tall and angular. Alien scouts had found them. Myra's heart pounded. She knew how scouts worked. They searched for threats first. They assumed danger. They acted fast. From the outside this would look wrong. A human shelter. An alien girl inside it. Warmth. Safety. Capture. Evan moved without hesitation. He stepped forward and placed himself between Mira and the tent entrance. Mira froze. He spread his arms slightly, feet planted firm against the ground. His body language was clear, even without shared language. He was not running. He was not hiding her. He was shielding her. The tent flap was pulled back hard. Cold air rushed in. 3 figures stood outside, tall and armored, their eyes bright and sharp. Their gear hummed softly with energy. Weapons were raised. Myra's breath caught. Instinct screamed at her to move, to obey, to step forward. Evan did not move. He raised one hand slowly, palm open. She's not a prisoner, he said firmly, even though he knew they could not understand him. She's safe. The scouts spoke among themselves in sharp, fast sounds. One of them stepped forward, weapon angled toward Evan's chest. Mira felt panic surge. "No," she said, forcing the sound out, though it came weak and shaking. She pushed herself forward, trying to step around Evan. He shook his head sharply and shifted, blocking her again. "Stay behind me," he said, voice low but unyielding. The scout leader made a sharp gesture. Two others moved to flank the tent opening. Evan stood firm. He knew in that moment that this could end badly. He was cold, tired, and unarmed. They were trained, armored, and afraid. But he did not step aside. Mira looked at his back, at the broad line of his shoulders blocking the weapons pointed at her. Something inside her burned hot and fierce. She could not let this happen. She stepped forward again, this time placing her hand on his arm. Evan felt it and hesitated. Mira leaned out just enough to be seen. She raised her free hand and spoke, her voice stronger now, filled with urgency. She spoke of the storm. Of collapse. Of the cold that had nearly killed her. She spoke of the human who had pulled her from the ice. Of warmth given freely. Of food shared when there was little. Of protection without chains. She spoke of fear and of trust earned slowly through pain. The scouts hesitated. Their weapons lowered slightly. Mira continued, pointing to the heater, the patched walls, the reinforced lines. She pointed to Evan's hands, scarred and raw from work. She pointed to herself, standing alive. The leader studied Evan closely now. Evan met its gaze without fear. He did not raise his voice. He did not bow. He simply stood, steady and unyielding. Mira finished speaking and stepped fully beside him. The wind blew softly between them and the scouts. The leader lowered its weapon completely. A quiet command passed between the scouts. Tension eased from the air, slow and careful. Evan let out a breath he had been holding. Mira felt her knees weaken, but she stayed standing. The scouts entered the tent carefully, eyes taking in every detail. Not as invaders now, but as witnesses. They saw no restraints. No signs of force. Only shared survival. One scout touched the repaired seam, then looked at Evan. Another studied the heat system adjustments, then looked at Mira. Understanding passed between them. The leader spoke again, this time softer. Mira listened, then turned to Evan. She did not know all the words yet, but she knew enough. She placed a hand over her chest, then gestured between him and the scouts. "They know," she said simply. "They believe." Evan nodded, exhaustion finally washing over him. Outside, the last of the storm faded into silence. The scouts stepped back, lowering their weapons fully. One of them made a sign of respect, placing a hand against its chest. For the first time, humans were not seen as intruders. They were seen as protectors. And that truth would travel far beyond the frozen world, carried by those who had seen it with their own eyes. The storm did not end all at once. It faded slowly, like a long breath finally released. The wind softened first, no longer striking the ice with anger. Then the snow thinned, falling in quiet lines instead of violent waves. The sky lightened from deep gray to pale white. For the first time since Evan had arrived on the frozen world, the planet felt still. Inside the tent, Evan sat with his back against a supply crate, eyes half closed. Exhaustion weighed on him. His hands were wrapped in thin bandages where the skin had cracked from cold and work. Every muscle ached. But he was alive. Mira stood near the entrance, watching the outside through a small clear panel. Her posture was steadier now. Strength had returned to her limbs, though faint pain still lingered. She felt the change in the air and knew the danger had passed. The alien scouts waited nearby, their camp set a short distance away. They had not left. They had watched, quietly, respectfully. Not as guards. Not as captors. As witnesses. Evan checked his console one more time. A signal blinked on the screen. Human rescue was inbound. He let out a slow breath and leaned his head back. "They're coming," he said. Mira turned to him. She understood the tone even if the words were unclear. She stepped closer and looked at the screen. Then she looked back at him. Rescue meant separation. The thought tightened something in her chest. The human rescue team arrived within hours. A shuttle descended through the thinning clouds, its engines humming low and steady. Evan stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the bright lights. The cold still bit, but it no longer felt deadly. The rescue crew moved fast, checking Evan's condition, scanning the area, securing equipment. They noticed the alien scouts and froze, hands hovering near weapons. Evan raised his arm at once. "It's okay," he said firmly. "They're not hostile." The crew hesitated, then lowered their weapons slowly. Mira stood beside Evan, calm and still. One of the scouts stepped forward and spoke, voice measured and clear. Though the humans could not understand the words, the meaning was clear enough. No threat. The exchange was brief but careful. Then the scout stepped back, giving space. The rescue leader turned to Evan. "You did good," she said quietly, eyes scanning the repaired tent, the alien presence, the signs of shared survival. "Very good." Evan nodded, too tired to reply. As preparations were made to leave, Mira felt the moment closing in. She turned to Evan, unsure how to speak what she felt. Words were still hard. Feelings were not. She touched her chest, then pointed to him. Then she placed her hand lightly against his arm. "Thank you," she said slowly, shaping the human sounds with care. Evan looked at her, surprised. Then he smiled. "You're welcome." The alien scouts approached. It was time for Mira to return. She paused before leaving the tent. She looked around the small space that had kept her alive. The heater. The patched walls. The place where fear had turned into trust. She looked back at Evan. She raised her hand in the way she had seen humans do, palm out, fingers spread. Evan lifted his hand in return. She left with her people, walking across the snow with steady steps. The scouts moved around her, protective but respectful. As they disappeared into the distance, Mira carried more than survival with her. She carried a story. A story of a human who had nothing to gain and everything to lose and still chose to help. A story of warmth given freely. Of food shared when there was little. Of standing in front of danger without force. When Mira returned to her people, she told that story again and again. She told it to elders who had only known humans through fear and old warnings. She told it to young ones who listened with wide eyes. She told it to leaders who had planned defenses and strategies. And slowly minds changed. Evan's journey home was quieter. The shuttle lifted off, leaving the frozen world behind. Evan sat strapped into his seat, staring out at the shrinking white surface. His body was covered in marks from cold and strain. Frost scars traced his hands and arms, reminders of the place he had survived. But inside he felt calm. When he returned to human space there were questions. Many questions. Reports. Reviews. Long meetings with serious faces. Evan answered honestly. He spoke of the storm. Of Mira. Of the choice he made. Some listened with doubt. Others listened with interest. But no one accused him of wrongdoing. Because something had changed. The alien reports arrived soon after. Clear. Direct. Respectful. They spoke of Evan Hale not as a threat, not as a rule breaker but as proof. Proof that humans could be trusted. That humans protected even when unarmed. That humans did not abandon the weak. The term spread quietly at first. Protectors. Evan returned to Earth with little ceremony. No parade waited for him. No grand speeches. He walked through familiar streets, feeling the warmth of a living planet beneath his feet. Sometimes, at night, he thought of the frozen world. Of the tent shaking in the storm. Of silver eyes watching him with fear that slowly turned into trust. Far away, Mira stood beneath a warmer sky, telling her people about a human named Evan. About a tent in the snow. About a moment when first contact was not made with words or weapons, but with choice. A single tent in the snow had changed everything.